What is up, y'all? Welcome back to my podcast, the Atlanta Audible. As usual, I'm your host, Ice Ray. Today, we're going to be taking a step back, looking at the league completely, and I'm going to be suggesting some truly wild and wacky trades that would completely flip the NFL landscape, whether fans are truly ready for them or not. The Tennessee Titans need to do is invest in weapons for quarterback Cam Ward, who was the first overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. Ward flashed some good, and yes, he flashed some bad, but he needs a fair shot with better weapons around him before we make definitive conclusions on whether or not he's a good quarterback. Ward has unreal athleticism, and the fact that he was able to keep his eyes down the field and complete this pass is ridiculously impressive, especially when you realize that it was a rookie doing all this. Not to mention, he fit the pass into a receiver that is completely smothered. There's not much space to fit this pass in. But what you always want to do is make life easier for your quarterback, especially your young quarterback. That is why the Titans should trade for Jaguars wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. Thomas is coming off a disappointing sophomore season where he had only 700 yards and 3 total touchdowns. If Tennessee is aggressive, which they should be, they can snag the receiver for a 2026 second round pick. With the slight breakout of Jacoby Myers in Jacksonville, he had 4 of his 9 games with the Jaguars, he had over 50 receiving yards, and Travis Hunter set to return from injury. He was heating up right before he got hurt with 101 yards in his final game with the Jaguars. Not to mention a deep tight end room. Jacksonville would likely deal Thomas if they got a good package for him. And a second round pick for a receiver who had only 2 receiving touchdowns and seems afraid to take a hit is a great deal. Not to mention, per Pro Football Focus, he had 8 drops, which was tied for the second most in the NFL. The only receivers with more drops were Jerry Jeudy and Jameson Williams, who had 9 apiece. Thomas dropped 14.3% of his passes, which was the 6th most in the NFL among receivers who saw at least 36 targets in 2025. In 2025, no Titans wide receiver had more than 515 receiving yards. In a down year, Thomas had 707. In his rookie season, he had nearly 1,300 yards and 12 touchdowns. Of the Titans' top 9 receivers in terms of receiving yards, 6 of them averaged under 10 yards per catch, meaning they were dinking and dunking all year long to get down the field. This was mainly because they didn't have any weapons that could consistently get open down the field. Meanwhile, Thomas can do this with his blistering 4.33 40. And yes, trading a player who had a mid to bad sophomore season after a great rookie season to a division rival has happened before, not to mention recently as well. The Eagles traded a 3rd round pick to scoop up wide receiver Jahan Dotson from their rivals, the Washington Commanders. In 2022, Dotson led his entire rookie class in receiving touchdowns with 7. In 2023, he had 518 yards and 4 scores. Not a bad season, but the Commanders still ended up trading him. And then he went on to do this for the Eagles in the Super Bowl.
What's coming? It's picked up. Hurts going deep, has a man. It is caught. Dotson down there.
If the Titans are serious about turning the team around, they need to be aggressive, and buying low on a Brian Thomas Jr. upside is a great place to start. I mean, he's only 23 years old and had an elite rookie season. The 2026 second round pick for the Titans is a 35th overall pick, which is almost a first rounder. The Jaguars could take C.J. Allen to fill the void of the departing Devin Lloyd. It's a win-win trade for both sides. This next trade would see another member of the 2024 NFL draft class on the move, wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. No matter what, the Steelers refuse to rebuild. They traded in Mike Tomlin for Mike McCarthy, which means they'll be trying to make the playoffs again in 2026. Not to mention, quarterback Aaron Rodgers will likely be back in 2026. If you refuse to rebuild, the best you can do is retool, and the Steelers desperately need a wide receiver too. No receiver on the team other than DK Metcalf had over 400 yards last season. Of their top 7 receiving leaders, only 2 were wide receivers. Harrison was drafted 4th overall just 2 years ago, and while he certainly hasn't been a bust, he hasn't lived up to the hype either. His 5 drops were tied for the 18th most in the NFL per PFF. And he dropped nearly 11% of the passes that went his way. The biggest elephant in the room is that Harrison and wide receiver Michael Wilson cannot coexist with each other on the field. With Harrison off the field, Wilson had games of 185 receiving yards, 118 receiving yards, and a game with 145 receiving yards and 2 scores. When both receivers were on the field at the same time, neither had a 100-yard game in 2025. Not to mention, Wilson himself is very young. He's only 25, and he had more yards, touchdowns, and 100-yard games than Harrison did last season. A desperate team, like the Steelers, would give up draft capital in exchange for Harrison. Something that the Cardinals desperately need to do is flip assets for their rebuild. A 2026 second and a 2027 fourth would likely get the deal done. It's pretty steep, but Harrison still has the generational tag and his potential is still through the roof. If the Steelers were to get it done, they'd be getting an elite route runner. Not to mention, Harrison may thrive as a wide receiver too. Then he'd no longer be going against opposing teams' best defenders. He's shown flashes of greatness. He had an elite fourth quarter against the best defense in the NFL, mossing an all-pro cornerback in Devin Witherspoon in week. He had a hat trick in the first half of a game against Los Angeles Rams in 2024. The issue are the drops and the inconsistencies. But maybe a change of scenery along with a change of role would help with that. As wide receiver 2 to DK Metcalf, he'd be asked to do a lot less. Not to mention, he'd have Aaron Rodgers getting him the ball, who's one of the best throwers of the football in NFL history. If the Steelers refuse to rebuild, they can get a wide receiver with a ton of high upside. And the Steelers badly need receiver help. This next trade would see yet another wide receiver on the move, with the Eagles sending wide receiver A.J. Brown to the Buffalo Bills. I know what some of you guys are thinking. The Bills traded for a big-name receiver in Stephon Diggs and it didn't work out. But honestly, outside of the Minneapolis Miracle, Diggs is just not a very good big-game player. He had 110 total yards in 4 playoff games with the Patriots this season. A.J. Brown is currently unhappy with his role. He wants more usage in Philadelphia. What team desperately needs a wide receiver 1? The Bills. After not making the Super Bowl and the AFC playoffs without both the Ravens and the Chiefs, the Bills made big moves and fired head coach Sean McDermott. The Bills know they need to make serious moves if they want to contend with Josh Allen. And getting your MVP quarterback, a quality wide receiver 1, is a great place to start. The package for Brown would likely be similar to what they gave up for Diggs. 2026 first and a 2027 fourth in exchange for Brown and a 2026 sixth-round pick. Brown is a better big-game player than Diggs. In the 2024 NFC Championship, he had 6 catches for 96 yards and a touchdown. In Super Bowl 59, he had 3 catches for 43 yards and added a score. The first time the Eagles and the Chiefs faced off in the Super Bowl, in Super Bowl 57, he again had 6 catches for 96 yards and a score. Diggs has played in 18 playoff games. In half of them, he's been held under 50 yards. In 3 of them, he's been held under 20 yards, including a 7-yard playoff game. So, trading for Brown would be different than Diggs because of the playoffs. Not to mention, he could be force-fed in Buffalo the way he wants to be. During his time in Buffalo, Diggs never had below 8 touchdowns in a single season. The lowest yardage total for his time in Buffalo was 1,180. Brown and Buffalo seems like a match made in heaven. The Bills desperately need a wide receiver 1, and Brown wants to be the focal point of an offense that's contending. Enough with the wide receiver talk. Let's talk about a blockbuster deal for a defensive player that would change the entire NFC. The Lions missed the playoffs in 2025. Now it's time for them to be aggressive and trade for Maxx Crosby. The defense has been Detroit's undoing ever since it became a good team. In 2023, they blew a 17-point lead to San Francisco 49ers in the NFC Championship. In 2024, the defense couldn't stop a nosebleed, allowing the Washington Commanders to score over 40 points in their first playoff game. In 2025, they missed the playoffs completely, with the defense allowing the Steelers and Vikings anemic offenses to score 29 and 23 respectively in games that would drop them out of playoff contention. Lions finished 4th in the NFL in sacks in 2025 with 49. However, in the 2 seasons prior, they finished in the bottom half of the league in sacks. Each of the last 2 Super Bowl champions has had an elite defensive line. The Seattle Seahawks were hounding the Patriots all night long in the Super Bowl, sacking Drake May 6 times and forcing him to throw errant passes.
50 to go. Trying to step up and shoot one downfield. It's intercepted.
The pressure off the edge forces Drake May to step up in the pocket and deliver what's an absolutely terrible ball. And look at how the Eagles' defensive line had Patrick Mahomes scrambling around in the pocket. And this was without even blitzing.
3rd and 9. 4-man rush. Mahomes pressure, steps away, running around, way back there, throws as he gets hit, it's up there, and it is nearly intercepted, and it's incomplete.
So, the Lions could create one of the best pass rushing duos in the entire NFL with Crosby and Aiden Hutchinson. Hutchinson had 14.5 sacks in 2025, the fourth most in the NFL, and he was named a second-team All-Pro. Meanwhile, Crosby had 10 sacks in just 15 games. He also had a career-high 28 tackles for a loss. The price to acquire Crosby would be high, with Detroit likely needing to surrender their 16th overall pick and a 2027 second. But it would easily create one of the league's most terrifying duos and would vault the Lions back into contention in 2026. Now, I know what some of you guys are thinking. Oh, the Lions desperately need help at cornerback. Why should they invest in another pass rusher? Well, investing in the pass rush can help the secondary. How, you might ask? Well, for one, if the pass rush is always getting home, then the secondary has to defend for less time. Also, if the pass rush is disrupting the quarterback, taking him out of his rhythm, it will lead to more bad decisions, it will lead to worse throws, it will lead to more turnovers for the secondary, and the Lions were actually in the bottom half of the league in total turnovers in 2025. Not to mention, this class is deep at cornerback. The Lions can get a potential starter at corner in day 2 of the NFL draft. This final trade would see one of the best teams in the NFL get even better. With the Chiefs desperately needing to flip assets and hosting probably the worst roster they've had in the Patrick Mahomes era. Sauce Gardner just went for 2 firsts last season, so it's entirely possible that the Chiefs could get a first for Trent McDuffie, who's been one of the best cornerbacks in the league over the past few seasons. Not to mention, it's entirely possible with the Rams holding not 1, but 2 first-round picks in 2026. There's not many players in this draft better than Trent McDuffie at a position of need for the Rams, so they should send their 29th overall pick to the Chiefs in exchange for the cornerback. Not to mention they still have their 13th overall pick, which they got in a deal with the trade with the Atlanta Falcons for James Pierce Jr. last season. The Rams secondary was burnt toast in the NFC Championship, with Jackson Smith-Njigba torching them for 153 yards and a score. But it wasn't just JSN. Rashid Shaheed had a huge catch on a 3rd down on the Seahawks' first drive of the game. McDuffie only surrendered 342 yards and 3 touchdowns in coverage in 13 games last season. He had 4 pass breakups and an interception. Darius Williams surrendered 50 more yards in 1 less game played than McDuffie. Quentin Lake gave up 472 yards and 4 touchdowns. Kobe Durant surrendered 643 yards and a whopping 8 touchdowns. Suffice to say, McDuffie would be a huge addition to the team, and with the Rams having a top 15 pick regardless, it makes sense for a contending team to trade away a first-round pick that's almost basically a second-round pick. So, these are my 5 wild and wacky offseason trades that I think would be fun for NFL teams. They'd make each team better on this list, and it would totally shake up the NFL offseason. Let me know in the comments if you agree with my trades or if you disagree with my trades, what you think, and as usual, have a great day. Leave a like, leave a sub. Ice Ray out.